Thank you. This is a great honor. After a short career as a librarian, primarily automating libraries, I spent the rest of my career educating librarians at UCLA, and I have been a great admirer of Lynn and Sara as people are out there doing it and building it, and these are people I expect them to read and watch as well. In the midst of the eScience program, Lynn and I had the honor of co-chairing a session, that very influential Warwick meeting that was put together. And again, I think there's just not enough people out there running major institutions who are on the front lines, engaging with the scholars, really building the future, as I think some of those meetings have tried to do. I was going to take my few minutes to add a few comments to cut across what Lynn and Sara have said, but give a bit more depth in issues of research data, which is my particular specialty and what I'm spending time here at Oxford. So the first point is to note that the push toward open access, as is being pushed through the Finch report, the RCUK policies, the changing policies in the US, is first of all about open access to publications at the time the articles are published, as opposed to thinking about the long-term open access, which is something that libraries have been the place, not publishers, libraries have been the place to provide access. Separately, although sort of in the same breath, they say thou shalt provide access to your data. But they say those things separately, where what we really need is the publications and the data to be tightly coupled together. You need the publications to document the data, you need the data to be pointed back to what covers it. And the only place we're going to get that real usefulness is a much tighter integration of those kinds of digital collections of the journal literature, which has been part of one place, and the data, which has been part of another. So that leads us to this larger set of problems of data as the new special collections. And this is, you can think of in several ways. I mean, Lynn already mentioned the movement in, I would say, definitely the nerd movement, and Dave and I have been to these beyond.
She points
media.
to Dave right away.
Well, Dave and I have been on the front lines of many conversations about this of let's let go of thinking of journal articles and books as something you sit and read with your eyes on a page, and think of them as something that machines and robots are mining and trying to cut across and synthesize. It makes a very different way of cataloging, organizing. The MARC record and so on really does not stand up well in this particular environment where we're moving. So we're trying to think about treating the whole literature as a corpus rather than individual articles. And then also acquiring data sets that don't have other homes. If it's genomics, there's places for that. If it's seismology, there's places for that. But there's a whole lot of data in the long tail. The big data, if anything, is going to solve itself. It's the smaller, interesting data that's not comparable. That's the much harder problem, and those are the things that are going to land on the Bodleian's lap, the British Library's lap, UCLA's lap, and we're not quite sure how to deal with them. It also requires much more domain expertise. And not that the journal article in physics is the same as the journal article in art history, but dealing with the data in physics and art history is a very, very different thing and requires a much deeper domain knowledge, just as libraries have moved away from many highly specialized libraries because it's simply so expensive to maintain them and start to aggregate and generalize. Now we're in a position of needing to drill back down, which definitely, I completely agree about the partnerships. I think that's the only way this is going to happen, but also I think scholars are realizing the only way their data are going to be protected is if they partner with a trusted institution. And I sit on these national, international boards of people dealing with data, and they're saying that the library is about the only place we trust that might be around long enough that we could get back to our data again. Now, that doesn't mean that we necessarily know what the expertise is going to take. I'm teaching graduate courses in data and data practices within graduate programs in library and information science and archives. But there are very few such courses. There's not a workforce out there. We need people who have, say, a PhD or at least a master's degree in a subject domain combined with these kind of background. That looks like what the workforce is going to be, but it's not clear who's going to pay for it. So we're going to have the partnerships. We're going to have to think differently about what the technology looks like as well. And for as heavily as we recruit people with technical backgrounds into information studies programs, we still get an amazing number of people who come and think that they can sit and spend their careers working with paper libraries and paper archives, and they don't realize they've gotten into a highly computational field. So getting them in where they understand that the library materials have to be outward facing, they have to be fully discoverable by the semantic web, linked open data, they need to know what RDF means, and those kinds of models. And thankfully Wolfram's going to solve this for, with Dave, and Anne is going to solve this for Oxford. I think Oxford is farther ahead, at least wrestling with some of these than many are. But there's other nasty ones, like dealing with the data is not like pulling down a text file and then reading it. It's something that you want to run computation on. And we're having these conversations about when do you take the data to the computation and when do you take the computation to the data. I don't think Sarah's ready to be running major server farms and with huge supercomputers behind them, which means you need a more federated kind of partnership. But Dave's going to figure this out over in the eResearch. He smiles and says yes, he will take care of that. But I think it's all of those things where it's not clear who's in charge or how they're going to be spread out, that we have to deal with them. But we have to deal with sustainable, durable digital collections, or we are going to have not just the black hole, but this digital dark age where there's a lot of discussion going on there. So as Michael Buckland said wisely many years ago, libraries are concurrently institutions of the past, the present, and the future. I mean, it really is three sets of roles. You can't abandon those 500 years of collections. You want to continue exploiting those legacy collections. You've got to work in the here and now with the curriculum, with today's researchers, today's data, and you've got to figure out how this collection, and to think of the collection as a whole, not the print and then the digital, but think of the collection as a whole and how you're going to move that along for maybe another 500 years as well. So yes, this is a time with great challenges, and it's a time where libraries, I think, have twice the responsibilities and half the money that they had before. So there's a lot of policy issues and funding and economic issues to be faced as well. So thank you.
Right.